Nisambula Vinaka, and a warm welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm the host, Louise Kaunisela, and we have a guest in from the Institute for Mission and Research, but launched recently by the Pacific Islands Forum Secretary General, Dame Meg Taylor. The Reweaving the Ecological Mat Framework proposes a development model different from pure capitalism. So it's a model that emphasizes well-being of Pacific peoples, tied in with the well-being of ecology and ecological relationships. Now, if anything, COVID-19 reminds us we need a new story of development and a new normal. My guest in the studio from the Institute of Mission and Research, we have the director, Aisake, Casimira, and we also have Theresa Fox, who is the communication officer. A warm welcome to the both of you to Speak Your Mind.
Vinaka Louise, we are happy to be here.
Okay, great. Now you need to explain to me, this is a book, right? Like I can see the books in front of you. So the one that I've mentioned is the one that you're holding right now. So maybe you would like, could you please explain what it really is about?
So this publication called the Reweaving the Ecological Mat Framework towards an Ecological Framework for Development is actually a framework that offers an alternative, like you mentioned, for development in the Pacific Islands region. What we've been having over the past many decades is a neoliberal capitalist development model where the focus is on the commodification of our natural resources in the environment. And the focus is on just profit, profit, profit.
I see.
But does that address the well-being of people, the well-being according to Pacific Islanders, where we have relationships with nature, where we have relationships with each other that extend beyond money and making money? So the publication is a framework, actually. And this is part of the Reweaving the Ecological Mat project that was initiated by the Institute for Mission and Research of the Pacific Theological College and the Pacific Conference of Churches. But I think the best person to talk about it is the person sitting right here.
Okay.
He's actually part of the team or the ones that initiated this project.
All right, then Aisake, you might like to let us know why you felt that you had to, write this book and release it as well.
Right. I think it's important to recognize the contribution of the Pacific Church leaders in this. Going back, say, 5 years ago when they produced a research publication called Navigating the Troubled Waters. Highlighted in that research report was that the Pacific household is broken, right? And what are the broken strands in that household is really to do with things like the relationship between men and women. Domestic violence statistics have been going up ever since, right?
Okay, yes.
And the destruction of our environment in terms of forestry, in terms of the land and all that. The pesticides have been used, and that's another thing.
Okay.
The third thing is to do with the health of our people. Many of our people are eating things that are, we buy from the shops, right? From the supermarkets, the processed food, right?
Yeah.
Which is much more efficient in terms of the availability is very accessible, but it has a downside to our health. And so you see the NCDs are growing up in the Pacific Islands, right?
Oh, heaps, yes.
Yeah.
So the idea is that how can we mend or repair the household? I mean, you think about the project as a household, right?
Okay.
In a household of a father, mother, grandfather, children, relatives, uncles, aunties, as we all know in the Pacific, our relatives live with us, right?
Yes.
Well, no, not always, but they all do. And so within the household, there are many things inside, including the politics that goes within the household, including the sharing of resources that goes in the household, right? The income that we bring to the household, how is that shared, right?
Okay. Right.
And you look at what does the household requires in terms of a good political relations or respect for your elder sister or whatever it may need, right? And so the project is really to look at that, the brokenness in the household.
Oh,
the
good.
disease, the NCDs, the mental health.
We have some of the highest NCD rates in the world.
And even the mental health is going up and up. And it's to do with the isolation and loneliness of our people beginning to feel today than it was.
Yes, and then now we have COVID-19 And it's not only affecting the world, it's a pandemic, and it's also, having a impact on the livelihoods of people in the Pacific.
Definitely. COVID-19 brought it out more sharply, the problems within our household.
Okay.
And the difficulties that we face and the challenges that we face that we need to look at and address and fix. And
Okay, so reweaving the ecological mat framework proposes a development model different from pure capitalism. I know you said this. What do you mean by this?
Well, looking at development, and I think in terms of development within the Pacific Island countries, think about development as a household kind of initiative, right? Your kids need to go to school, for example, right? Your kids need to attend church. I mean, if they do belong to a religion, your kids need to know their identity as whether they're Fijians or wherever, Tongans or Samoans or wherever in the Pacific Island countries you come from. So development encompasses all that.
Okay.
And so how do we repair that? Well, in terms of the mat, we all know what the mat is about, right? But as the years go by, as the decades goes, the strands in the mat begin to wear out, right?
Yes.
And so those are the strands that we need to replace.
Okay.
Currently, our development is measured only by how much you get in terms of income and how much you spend, right? So within a household, the income that comes, how much we spend on education, how much we spend on these things, right?
Okay.
Develop ecologically, meaning the ecological framework for development says, okay, we can still do that, but it says that there's more to the income and the expenditure we bring in as a family. There's also the identity, the culture, and the traditions that we have. And those things need to be accounted for, and how can we strengthen those, right?
Okay, so how do you think we can strengthen these?
One is health, right? Look at NCTs around the Pacific Islands, or even in Fiji as well. It's one of the highest in the Pacific anyway. So health not only has a physical health benefit, but in terms of the religious teachings about health, right?
Yeah, all connected.
All connected. How about health in terms of the environment? How can we rehabilitate our land so that they produce good food?
Okay. Oh, that's clear enough. But we'll talk more on this when we come back on Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. We're back on Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. I'm Louise Kaunisela, and my guests in the studio today are the Director of the Institute of Mission and Research, Aisake Casimira, and we also have the Communications Officer, Theresa Fox. So, Aisake, you know how you say about this book is encouraging us really to, appreciate and go back to our traditional ways. I mean, it's not all about the money. But I reckon, especially after the pandemic, money had not really much value because, people lost their jobs. And what happened? They truly appreciated the fact that they could plant something and it could grow and feed their families. So maybe this is the lines that you are going along with this book as well, just highlighting the importance of bringing and preserving our traditional values.
Yes, it's one of the intentions of that project is for people to revalue the traditional ways of living, right? It's not necessarily going back to wearing what we were before,
but appreciating.
But the appreciation that our ways of lives that was from our ancestors until now has value even now, right?
Exactly.
And then so in terms of looking after the land, they used to be, and people know this, there used to be a time where we say to we put this place to, to preserve for 3, 6 months or 1 year, right? But the purpose of it is that the land recuperates its richness, right?
Yeah.
So we can plant again and, get food again from it. And so one of the goals of this particular framework is for us to revalue what we had before.
Yeah.
To give it significance and give it a whole lot of emphasis on it. Because that is part of well-being, right? It's not just the income that we earn, which is still relevant today, because the reality is people still go to work. A lot true. COVID-19 has made our people lost many of their jobs. True. And it's also true that some of our people are beginning to go back to the land and the traditional ways of farming, fishing, whatever it may be, and eating local food, right?
Yes.
So that's the important part of it.
Yeah. I mean, geez, we have rich soil, we have, lovely abundance of fruit in our markets.
Yes.
And especially when we have fruits in season, it's always good, for example, we have pineapples now in this month. We have also, other fruits as well. Okay, so just give some examples of the book that's in front of you. Maybe you'd like to give some examples, Theresa Fox, from there.
In terms of the framework and what it is proposing or promoting is well-being, the well-being of people. So having lives that are not completely just ruled by making profit and profit and profit. For example, when you look at the forest as Pacific Islanders, we have relationships with the trees. We have totems. Like in Fiji, or what is your bird, what is your fish. We have these relationships that are a way that we also protect our environment because we know that we need them and they need us. And there is this, dependency, interdependence of life and the protection of life. But under the model that we've been working with over the many decades, many Pacific Island countries and across the world, the new liberal model, the focus is not so much on that. The focus is on, let's look at the tree and we assign a dollar value to that tree. But as Pacific Islanders, we need to remember when you look at the tree, there is more to that tree than dollars. That tree represents so much more. So that is the push of the framework. Let's just bring back those traditional, our ancestral values, our Pacific Island values, our unique identity as Pacific Islanders. That at its simplest form is an example. When you look at the tree, it means more than just money. And if we can reconnect to those things, then we are improving our well-being. That's what this framework
that's
is
very
talking
nice.
about.
Yep, that's very nice because of the fact that sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times humans get selfish. It's only about the dollar, but they don't think that we need each other. Every single living thing on the earth is here for a purpose. So if you're going to, destroy one, obviously the balance will be off. Isn't that right, Aisake or Theresa?
Our balance is off kilter right now.
Yeah.
And one of the things in terms of what you're talking about on practical, say, projects, if you like, application of it. When you look at education, when we were in class 1 or class 2, we used to do things like handicraft, right? And that's to do with carvings and weaving fans and even dancing the local dances, right?
Yeah.
I mean, over the years that has changed. It's gone out from the curriculum. But the point is that
is it really?
The point of losing that is that we lose something of our well-being, right? Because well-being is not only about income and expenditure. Our well-being is also about our identity, culture, and traditions are kept, right?
Our relationships.
And so our education systems in the Pacific, and not only in Fiji, but also around the Pacific, we have adopted a kind of an education model that leaves out this part of well-being. That our children need to grow up knowing who they are, right? And part of majority of it has to do with culture, traditions, the way they dance, their songs, and the ways of agriculture, right? So now that's gone from the curriculum. And so one of the practical things that we need to do is to bring that back into our education system, right?
Yes, I reckon so. So how do we do that?
Well, the thing is that, one, I mean, in terms of the policy level, education, those who deal with education ministries and governments, they need to recognize that who you are as a specific person or a Fijian or whoever, that the whole person is made up of these things.
Yes.
So at the policy level, they need to be able to discuss this and say, let's bring it back because COVID-19 shows more than just a loss of income and loss of jobs. It shows the benefits, the emerging benefits of people going back to the land and doing agriculture on their own, right?
Right.
And for people, it was sort of a rediscovery, like when COVID-19 happened and there was the lockdown and there was no work, everybody running back to the land. It seemed like it was a new thing again.
Yeah,
We're
true.
discovering. But that shows how far we've gone off the track. Because that is the way our ancestors lived, closely connected with nature, the environment, having these important relationships that brought value into their life, fulfillment of life.
It is contentment, you know, you
Yeah,
have
contentment.
food, you have lots of food. I mean, that's something that used to be my dream before. Man, I wish I could stay on a beautiful island and just plant belly and
And you can.
don't work for money and just, you know, live off the sea and go for a swim and eat. That would be a lovely life if you think about it. But yeah, we'll be back soon on Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. This is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits, your only classic hit station in the country. Be sure to tune in. And my guests are from the Institute of Mission and Research. We have the director, Aisake, Casimira, and also the communication officer, Theresa Fox. So just bringing back the importance of not losing your culture, right?
Not losing our identity.
Identity, yes.
As Pacific Islanders, people full of richness of culture and traditional and values that emphasize the well-being of life, as opposed to the identity of just market-driven individuals who are just focused on making the most profit and focused on materialistic things that in the end do not give a lot of fulfillment or wellness of life. And our societies are already showing it. We have some of the highest rates of non-communicable diseases in the world.
And we shouldn't, because I mean,
we have some of the highest rates of violence.
Yeah.
Violent, domestic violence in the world.
True.
We are in the top 10 percentile in almost all these sad statistics. And that speaks to the fact that we have a problem and we cannot be like the ostrich and bury our heads in the sand. We need to wake up and see what's happening. And so, and go back to who we are and identifying, re-identifying, refocusing our lives on the things that matter. And that is our environment. We have climate change now to deal with. We have COVID to deal with, and we have so many things to deal with. And so the framework is all about that. And also about, part of the framework is also an ecological, economic accounts, the way we value our resources as Pacific Islanders, like I was talking about earlier, the trees. How do we value the trees? How do we value the oceans? Do we look at them and just see money? Because if we are seeing it that way, then we are still stuck in the thing that is the problem, which is just, you are diminishing the value of everything just to dollars. When in fact that everything around us has much more value than just making money. Because if we are going to look at the forest, it's just a source of income. We are going to decimate that forest and we are going to clear it and we're going to damage the land and damage the ecosystem and damage actually life. And actually we are also damaging ourselves because we need these things to survive.
Yeah. So, Aisake, is there anything else you want to add on to that? I mean, like you give us the example of valuing our resources, but not just thinking of money to make money out of our resources. I mean, we can make money out of our resources, but we don't overdo it.
Think bigger, have the values that guide the way we make money. Or
You know, once upon a time, going back some 10 to 15 years ago, you know, we used to have in the villages or wherever we come from, the agriculture shows, not the kind that we're doing it now, where we congregate in one place and then just show off whatever.
Yeah.
But the point of that, it used to be in the 1970s and 80s with the agriculture shows, when people really go to the land and plant, right? And at the end of the year, they bring together their food stuff, like yams, ondalo, bananas, and they show off whatever they plant, right? The point of that is that people come to know the value of hard work, the value of what you earn is from the sweat that you give. Right?
That's so true, yes.
Right? Today, we go to the supermarket and pick things off from the shelf, right? it is very efficient. It is very accessible. Health-wise, we lose part of our skills in agriculture because we no longer go back to the land to plant.
Mm-hmm.
And then our health is subjected to so many chemicals that at the end of the day, we become sick and die younger than we're not supposed to.
Because we're not eating the fresh food that we're supposed to.
Mm.
We want to go for the
Yeah.
processed ones or maybe the takeaways.
Yes.
You know, the oily food and all that, eh? Okay, so...
Because the act of farming was not just about making food. The act of farming actually was having a relationship with the land and having a relationship with the environment and with the soil. You know, our forefathers, they did that. When they go into the forest, before they cut down a tree, they'd speak a few words to the tree and ask permission, you know, because trees are harvested for specific purposes. But now, because we've changed and we look at our natural resources as purely a source of making money, we've forgotten about the values that we had that come with it. And
it's just like having respect for whatever is existing on the earth. Respect for the land, respect for the trees, respect for the ocean, and just making sure that it's enough for everyone. Because the population now has just, so many people. And if we don't do anything right now, like what you were saying, you know, look after our land and sea, I mean, it could easily, I mean, you look at the tuna, sometimes it runs out, you know, people fish all our tuna.
and that's because when we go fishing, we bring back the fish and then we sell it and then we go and buy tuna. It's just strange the way
It
we
doesn't
behave.
make sense. I would support you in that. It doesn't make sense, right? Okay. So, I mean, as a Pacific Islander, I mean, what would you like to stress of importance to our fellow Pacific Islanders?
Well, today, I mean, in terms of where the world has developed since, and development has understood in a different way than our forefathers and foremothers 30 or 40 years ago.
Okay.
Those times, people were imbued with a sense to make things work, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of hard work involved in it, a lot of consultations, and these things need to happen now, today.
Yes.
Ever since COVID-19 happened, the emerging issues around the Pacific Island countries is that people are longing to go back, not necessarily go back, but to recapture the values that sustained their ancestors for decades and centuries, right? So the idea, what we need to do now is that governments in the Pacific region, as a policy matter, they will need to pursue this and say, let's do this. Let's do this as people of the Pacific, as governments of the Pacific. Let's lead our people to a way to understand our well-being as a holistic manner, making up of culture, traditions, education, of development of income, work, and all these things combined together.
Because, I mean, we did have our own way of surviving in the past, you know, not without money. I mean, our ancestors, they lived well. They didn't die of non-communicable diseases like we are now. I mean, they were strong because of the food that they ate, obviously, because what we eat is, you know, what we are, healthy. So, okay, so for Pacific Islanders, if you're trying to get them to recapture how we used to survive before.
Recapture the values,
The values,
the way they
right.
appreciated everything around them and respected life and diversity.
Okay.
Capturing those values in the way we approach the way we develop now.
Okay.
And having those values in it and not just thinking purely dollars.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll come back for more on Speak Your Mind. Gold FM, only the classic hits. Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. This is a live radio talkback show, and we have the delayed coverage shown on FBC TV. That's every Tuesday night at 11 and Wednesday morning at 11. Now, if you want to call, you're most welcome. If you have any question for the director of the Institute for Mission and Research, Aisake Casimira. Now, I know we were talking how it is important that we build our resilience, especially now with COVID-19. I'm sure, people, Pacific Islanders, I reckon, are so much better off because, we actually do know we haven't finished. We know how to plant. It's in us. I mean, well, maybe for some who come from the village to the city. But I need my friend here. You're a youth. Just to please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Daphne Kiki.
Daphne Kiki, yes?
I'm a RAM youth, reviewing the ecological mat youth representative. Working with IMR at PTC.
Okay, so can you just tell us a little bit about your view on the subject that we're covering right now, on how this book, the ecological, revitalizing the ecological mat framework. Can you tell us about your experience and how you feel about this book, why it's good?
So, reviewing the ecological mat framework is a framework that is an alternative to the current development framework that we have. So with the youth, REM youth, it's all about reframing Pacific youth's mindset on the current development model that we have and looking into our spiritual, Pacific spirituality and traditions and cultures.
Okay.
Reframing youths to think about how they can incorporate the cultures and traditions into our development model that we have now, but as Pacific and owning our development process and for our future generations. So.
Yeah, that's very important, our future generation. So, doing this, you're actually looking ahead. Yeah? So how do you think our youths are now, Aisake? Are they, do they know about their culture?
Well, that's
depending on where they are, I
depending on where they
suppose.
are, yeah.
Well, I suppose we have some who come from the villages, they come to the city, and that's when they lose touch with their roots, because maybe they came when they were really young, or their parents were still young, they were babies, and they don't go back, because I think the network for Pacific Islanders is a really strong one. I wouldn't say that we've, weakened like really bad. I think we're not too bad. What do you think, Aisake? What do you think, Daphne?
I think for youths in the Pacific today, we are conditioned by our education system to look at, after we graduate or after we finish school, we look at income jobs. So we do not go back to our land and make a living out of that. So those values that we have as Pacific Islanders are somewhat pushed aside, and we're looking at those introduced values that our education has taught us. So yeah, I think the Reviewing the Ecological Mat is about reframing those mindsets to think about this alternative development framework for us as Pacific people.
Okay, so do you have an example of how we can convince more youth to revitalize their culture or their tradition in, as you said, with the land, respecting the land, the sea?
For youths nowadays, we have a lot of youth unemployment, and I think those youths that are unemployed shouldn't think that they don't have anything to do now. They're like useless in
like
society.
they just lost hope, they're useless in society, right?
But they can look at going back into cultures, traditions, our land, and make use of those stuff, our resources as Pacific people, the Pacific resources that we have. You can make use of that to make a living out of
you don't really need a full-time job or a degree.
No.
You can, still get by, like how you were saying, Daphne. That's really good. So how do you think that we can do this?
So for the youth, the Weaving the Ecological Mat youth, we've been involved with producing all this to the vision book. We have youths that have visions inside this book.
Oh,
and
nice.
They're talking about how youths can use our Pacific cultures, traditions, land, our spirituality as So we have this connection with our land and values of specific people, especially the youths of today. So the Reviewing the Ecological Met youth is trying to advocate and educate the young people today to relook at how they see development and how they can go by or live.
Yeah,
in
that, I
this,
mean, that just makes so much sense, you know. I mean, some people, they don't even have, you know, the mind to actually get a degree. But then you see, when COVID-19 happened, people who had degrees, they didn't have any jobs. And they had to themselves return to the land. Yeah. So, I mean, this COVID-19 has taught us a lot of lessons, don't you think,
Yes,
Aisake?
yeah. Well, one of the things in terms of practical applications of where the REM youth is at the moment, not only in terms of the publications that they have helped to produce,
Well,
but
that's
also
nice.
in
You had
terms
the
of the
youth
art,
take part, eh?
So the art they have been in the last two weeks ago, they put together this art exhibition of the different drawings and paintings, right?
Oh, okay.
But I think in terms of, there are a number of things that are already happening. You know, a number of youth are involved in mental health, right? And so that's already happening by other youths. There's a number of youth doing climate change adaptation, replanting of mangroves. So those things are happening. The thing for now, I think it's important to recognize that our time, the time today, is the time of the young people, right? If you like, they're on the edge of producing a vision for the Pacific, right? What that vision is, they will need to describe it for us. They will need to find it for us.
That's
okay?
true. It's so important, the youth.
But it's that context that they have to context of the COVID-19. You know, the loss of jobs, the loss of whatever it may be. Yeah? And it's not to say that they're not doing anything at the moment. Many youth groups around the Pacific are doing different things. What needs to happen today is that these youth groups need to come together and say, let's do this for our region, let's do this for our leaders in politics, and say this is what we would like our region to be in the next 50 years. Huh?
Yeah, very good.
And that's important.
Very important, yes. So, yeah. All right then. So, yeah, I get what you mean. It's for the future of, you know, I'd say Pacific Island people that we need to be doing this seriously now, because otherwise there's going to be a big problem. You know, COVID-19, we haven't seen an end to it yet, so we don't really know what's going to be happening. I know about vaccines and all that, but yeah, the land and the sea, perfect. Your culture, perfect too. On Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. We will have more for you in a moment. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. You're with me, Louise Kaunisela, and my guest in the studio, the director of the Institute of Mission and Research, Aisake Casimira, as well as Daphne Kiki. Yes, she's the youth, and she's also part of the recently launched book, which is the Reweaving the Ecological Mat Framework. And I can get what you mean, that this is a very different time. We have to adjust to the new normal, COVID-19, and now people realize how important, especially for Pacific Islanders, how we survive so nicely with no problem when COVID-19 is on. What do you think? No, but I need to ask you first, how do you think we can build resilience in our youth going into the future?
I think for the youths today, the youths need to be heard. And so in order to build resilience among youths, they need to voice their opinion, especially in policy making and how they will survive going forward and the leadership in the region too. So they are the leaders of today and tomorrow, and they'll be the next generation of leaders. So in building their leadership, the most important thing is for them to voice their opinions in those policy makings and laws of the countries, Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Voice the opinions. That is so true. I know. Do you ever experience sometimes, people who are older don't really want to listen to you as youth? They think, oh, you're too young or something like that. Do
yeah,
you feel that way sometimes?
yeah, I think these connections are generational gaps. I think that we need to bridge
Yeah.
the generational gaps and listen to young people, because young people do have a lot to say in our society. They have a lot of ideas that they want to voice, and our leaders should listen to them and give them a space to talk in decision making in the country, policy making, laws. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daphne. That's very nice. And Aisake, youth, they are actually picking up now and making their voices heard. So, for policy making, what are some of the things that you would like to see, Daphne,
Um,
in relation to maybe what we're talking about?
so I think for policy making, the alternative framework to our development, current development, and just for leaders to look into what is our alternative
Okay.
in the development process of our countries, our Pacific countries, and how do we make it viable for our people and our Pacific region as a whole.
Thank you,
That's one
Daphne.
of the things that might be good in terms of policy making, is that when there is agriculture, when in terms of agriculture, the subject of agriculture, right? And that in the curriculum of agriculture, that they should include things like traditional agriculture in it, right?
Right. Very
What
true,
the
yes.
names of trees and what is the protocols in terms of land, approaching land. So those things are in the curriculum in teaching agriculture, right?
Right.
So that's in terms of the education system, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I reckon.
And so that could be one application of young people pushing such a policy goal with regards to education and agriculture in the region,
Yes.
wherever we may be. Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Don't you agree, Daphne? So this is what you've been discussing, and just trying to prepare our generation, our future generation, for what's coming.
Right.
I mean, now look at us two. We never knew that we'd live through a pandemic, would we?
No.
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
but
this is like something out of a sci-fi
Yeah.
movie when you look at COVID-19. They have to have all these masks and all that. I never believe I'd be living through this. So, I mean, that's just one example. So that's why it's very important to have the framework set out
Yes.
to guide them. It's like a guide, eh?
Well, in terms of a framework, it's not specific. I mean, it's not a specific that you should do this and this. It gives you a guide, right?
Yes.
That if we follow this these guidelines, and including the three, in terms of religious values, spirituality, culture, and economics. So those basic things in terms of the household, we come back to the household,
Yeah.
that the future of our household today in Fiji and elsewhere in the Pacific region will have to be defined by the young people, right?
Yes.
And so while we still maintain our systems of education, of economics, and politics, we begin to say what are the policy things that we need to include into that system.
Yes.
Politics of relationship. We need to include agriculture that teaches how we the seasonal planting, yeah,
Yeah.
and no pesticides, right?
Right.
We
Yes.
need to include
Organic.
organic, huh?
Yeah.
Use organic. We need to include into our health system teachings about herbal medicine, right?
Yes.
We don't do that. We don't know that in the villages.
Only the villagers, they know
No,
about
about these things, right?
just to keep, healthy. Yeah? Like we know laya for us here.
Yes.
We make that and drink that so, we can have a healthy intestine.
Yes. And
Yes.
so those simple things
Yeah.
that has been taken out from the system, you and I, we benefited from this when we were children, right?
Yes.
But our young people today, no. And so they will have to have the courage to be able to say, let's make these policy changes within the current system.
Yeah, but there's something I also want to ask you, Aisake. You know, there's a proverb, but I can't remember how it goes. I might say it wrong, but you know, they say something about, you know, how a rooster will crow, so will, you know, the young whatever, chicken or hen, whatever you call it. But don't you think it's true that the youth do follow what the older generation teach them?
They do, to a certain extent, whereby they reach a certain age where they make up their own mind what they need to do. But in terms of COVID-19 and moving forward, this is their time.
Yes, I think they should. You should have more power in your voice. Don't. I mean, obviously, the older generations have something really nice to teach.
And they should
take the good things. Take the good
they
things.
should begin to cry like the rooster. Not all of them are roosters. There are some hens among them, but they still take on that.
Isa, okay, it ends right here now. Speak your mind, and again, thank you for preparing this very nice book. So, where can we get the book from?
You can get it from the Institute for Mission and Research.
Okay. So, is it free or do we have to pay? Well, I mean, obviously we have to pay something, or is it free?
It is free. It is free. The copies are free, but if you want to donate something,
yeah, well, it would be nice to donate something, yes. And it would make really good reading, I'm sure. So they have to come to where you are, the Institute of Mission and Research,
yes,
which is
the Pacific Theological College at Muya Road in Nasese.
Okay, so be enlightened. Come along, go along, and get the book and read it. And Daphne, thank you very much for coming on the show, as well as the director of the Institute of Mission and Research, Aisake Casimira. Vinakavakalevu on Speak Your Mind. Until next week, it's been so good to have your company. I'll catch up with you then. You take care, look after yourself, and look out for each other. Nisamo demanda.